Ciao, hi everyone. This is Domenica Marchetti from the class of 1980. I want to thank Alicia Walker for inviting me to join you for a few minutes today. Some of you who go way back, like I do, might remember my mom, Gabriella, who was very active at Stuart when I was a student there. She was particularly active in the annual fundraiser, the Stuart Bazaar, and every year she would make dozens of batches of her ossobuco and baked pasta and other goodies that people really, really loved. So I thought I'd give you a little update on my mom. A couple of weeks ago, Gabriella celebrated her 96th birthday. Incredible. She is quite frail and she's in assisted living, and because of the current situation I was not able to be with her in person, but I'm happy to say that my dad Frank was there and is there every day with her and watches over her, and he and the staff gave her a wonderful celebration. So I just wanted to pass along that bit of news. It won't surprise you that I inherited my mom's passion for cooking, and I work as a food writer and recipe developer, and I write cookbooks. So I thought, because so many of us are spending time in our kitchens cooking and baking, I would share with you one of my favorite recipes from a little book of mine called Ciao Biscotti that came out a few years ago. So I'm going to make the classic almond biscotti, or cantucci as they're known in Italy, and I will assemble my ingredients and then we'll get started. Okay, so I've assembled our ingredients. This is a really simple recipe, nothing exotic required. In fact, it doesn't even have butter, which is good because I'm down to my last stick and I don't want to use it. So I've got 2 cups of flour, which is about 250-260 grams, 1 cup of sugar, 200 grams, 1 cup of whole almonds, and I've left the skins on, but of course you can use blanched almonds if you prefer. I toasted these in a moderate oven for about 8 minutes just to crunch them up a bit, and that's about a 350 degree oven, or 177 Celsius. I've also got a half a teaspoon of baking powder, a quarter of a teaspoon of fine salt. I have 2 whole eggs and an extra yolk in here, and I will be using the white later on, and half a teaspoon of vanilla and half a teaspoon of almond extract. This is optional, but I actually like the boost of flavor that these provide. So you can mix this dough by hand as you would mix pasta, just by pouring the flour out onto your work surface, making a well, and adding the other ingredients. But I'm going to use a mixer because it's a lot quicker and it saves work on my hands. And I'm using the paddle attachment because we don't want to add too much air. We don't want to incorporate too much air. So I'm going to put in the dry ingredients. So that's the flour, the sugar, and the baking powder and salt. I'm just going to mix this briefly to combine them. And I'm doing it on low so that the flour doesn't go flying all over the place. Now I'm going to mix in the almonds, and I'm just going to mix very slowly. What this does is it breaks up some of those whole almonds. And of course, when you slice the biscotti after they're baked the first time, you'll be able to, you'll slice into the almonds. So now at this point, we just have to add our wet ingredients. I'm gonna carefully mix up these egg yolks with the whites, just a little bit to combine them. And then I'm going to add that, as well as the vanilla and almond extracts. I'm just going to let the mixer do the work until the ingredients are combined into a dough. This is a rather sticky dough, and it can be a little bit difficult to handle, but I'll talk about that when we get to that part. So it's coming together nicely. And what I'll do is I'll finish working it by hand. All right, so we want to make sure that all the flour has been mixed in and that there's none hanging around. So I'm going to dump it onto the countertop and work it by hand a little bit. Okay. go. Let me get the mixer out of the way and then we'll mix by hand. Okay, so here's the dough on the countertop. You can see it's a little bit dry. So I'm going to spoon in a little bit of that leftover egg white. I'm going to use the rest later to brush on top of the biscotti loaves after I've formed them. But I'm working with a different flour than I usually work with, and it's a little bit less processed. So I think that's the reason why it's a bit dry. But it will shape up nicely, which is good because biscotti dough can be awfully sticky. Put in a little bit more egg white and difficult to work with. So at least this is a dough that will be pretty easy to shape once I've got all the components together. So yeah, that egg white really helped, kind of did the trick. At this point, you can refrigerate the dough if you're feeling it is kind of sticky and you don't want to work with it. If you refrigerate it for a couple of hours, it's much easier to work with. But I think I'm going to go ahead and work with it now. I'm going to just split it in half and shape it with my hands, a little bit of rolling out, a little bit of pressing. I'm going to form it into a log. If your hands get really sticky, you can, I've got a little tub of water here, you can dip your hands lightly in water and then that helps, you're able to shape without your hands adhering too much. So you can see this is kind of a skinny, rustic loaf. I've got a baking sheet here with parchment on it, and I'm just going to gather up this loaf and carefully deposit it on one side of this sheet. Like so. And now I'm going to shape the second roll in the same way. And of course my hands have gotten sticky again, so I'm going to just moisten them a tiny bit. There we go. This actually turned out to be a very nice dough. That goes on next to the other one. You can make one large loaf if you want, to make really big, broad, kind of coffee bar style biscotti, but these are going to be more like the classic size and shape, and they're perfect for dunking in a little bit of dessert wine or coffee. So the last step here is brushing. Don't have all my tools together, but I'm going to brush the top of the loaves with a little bit of this egg white, just a touch. Like so. And then I'm going to sprinkle 2 tablespoons of sugar over the top. And I've measured out my sugar. I might not eat all of it, but we'll see. I like the crunch that the sugar provides on the baked biscotti, and they're also really pretty. So now these are going to go into a 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 177 Celsius oven for 25 minutes, and then we'll take them out and I will show you next steps. Welcome back. As you can see, our loaves are baked. They baked for 25 minutes. And they cooled on the baking sheet for 5 minutes, and then I transferred them to this baking rack, and they have been cooling for about 20 minutes. So now they're cool enough to handle. You can see cracks on the surface. This is desirable. This is how you know that the loaf is baked properly. So the next step is to cut them into slices. There are 2 knife options that I use. One is the santoku style knife with the flat edge, and the other is a serrated knife like a bread knife. Personally, I prefer the santoku, but try either way and see what works best for you. So now it's just a matter of cutting the slices a little bit on the bias into about 1/2 inch thick pieces, like so. Pardon the loud crack noise every time I slice through it. Right. They smell really lovely. You can smell the almond and the vanilla and the egginess of them. So I think they're going to be really good. All right, so we've gone through our first loaf, and I just want to hold one up and show you what it looks like. These are pretty sturdy, which is what the classic almond biscotti should be. They really are dunking cookies. They're pretty hard once they've gone through the second bake. So now I'm just going to arrange them back on the baking sheet. I'm using the same piece of parchment. No reason to waste another one. And I'm just going to line them up, and then they will bake for 10 minutes at 300 degrees, so about 150 Celsius on one side, and then I'm going to turn them and bake them on the other side. So about another 20 minutes or so of baking altogether. And because they're going to be spread out on the baking sheet like this, I will probably do this in batches. So I will get this going and I will show you what they look like when they're fully baked. Welcome back. As you can see, the biscotti are baked. I was able to fit them all onto the cookie sheet, so I only had to do one batch. I baked them on one side for 10 minutes, and then I flipped them and baked the other side for 10 minutes. They're still cooling, but you'll see if you make them that they will become quite crunchy as they cool. They really are the classic biscotti that are great for dipping in coffee or a glass of vin santo or dessert wine. There are so many ways to adapt this recipe. You can use hazelnuts in place of the almonds. You can put a little bit of citrus zest into the dough. One of my favorite recipes from Ciao Biscotti is the chocolate dipped coconut biscotti. So be sure to try those out. And I put some here in this pretty plate that was my grandmother's. You can see how pretty the sugar topping is and the sliced almonds. Really appetizing. They smell so good. Anyhow, thank you so much for joining me. Please stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.